The 10th chapter is A Classless Society. Arendt explains how totalitarianism needs a mass of people who have no strong ties to each other. A mass society instead of structured class system. This makes it easier for totalitarian rulers to control them. There are two specific paths. First, the masses. They are isolated individuals who feel disconnected from traditional classes. As old social structures weakened, lots of people were left alone. They no longer felt a part of any meaningful community. Masses are easy targets for totalitarian movements since they feel lonely and powerless. They are eager to belong to something and to follow a strong leader. Masses don't think critically, they want clear, simple ideas, even lies, that make them feel safe and united. The second is the temporary alliances between the mob and the elite. The mob, they were violent, radicalized parts of the masses who were angry and willing to destroy the current system. The elite, they were intellectuals, bureaucrats, and upper class people who have lost faith in traditional values. Normally, the elite and the mob are enemies, but in the rise of totalitarianism, they team up temporarily. The mob provides the energy and violence. The elite provides credibility, money, and organization. Both want to tear down the old system even though they have different reasons. The mob wants revenge and chaos. The elite is bored with old traditions and seeks something new or absolute. The next chapter is the totalitarian movement. Totalitarian governments like Nazi Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union use both propaganda and terror to control people's minds and lives. Propaganda was the constant flow of messages, images, and speeches meant to shape what everyone thought. Terror was the use of fear, violence, and secret police to punish or scare anyone who disobeyed. Together, propaganda convinced people to support the regime, while terror kept them too afraid to oppose it. Totalitarian ideologies often claim to be based on science or truth. For example, Nazis talked about a racial science and communists spoke of scientific socialism. They used complicated technical language and charts to make their ideas sound like real facts. People might think if they have data or science behind it, it must be true. In reality, this was a trick to make the ideology seem logical and unavoidable. The regimes mixed real science with made up ideas to justify whatever they wanted to do. They knew that workers, students, and the educated elites had different interests. They spoke to each audience in its own language. To workers and farmers, propaganda promised jobs, bread, land, or higher wages. To factory managers or intellectuals, the leaders talk about big ideas, philosophy, history, or progress. In speeches to foreign audiences, they used diplomatic or legal sounding phrases. By addressing different audiences separately, the leaders made everyone feel included in the big movement. But behind all these different messages was the same core idea: total loyalty to the regime. The idea was to replace normal social groups with a single party community. Even after this regime took complete control of the country, terror remained important. It wasn't just used to win power, it was used to keep power. Once in control, leaders continued to use secret police, surveillance, and public punishments to maintain fear. Anyone could be labeled an enemy of the state for no clear reason. People lived in constant fear that a wrong word or a chance comment could lead to arrest or disappearance. This ongoing terror made sure that nobody dared to organize real opposition. In fact, terror kept society on edge and taught people to obey without question. In a totalitarian state, fact and truth were often twisted or ignored. The government controlled all the newspapers, radio, and books so it could make anything true. One of the most powerful lies spread by Nazi propaganda was the idea of a worldwide Jewish conspiracy. For example, people thought Jews were behind financial systems, governments, and revolution, even though there was no real proof. These false beliefs had been around for a long time. During the Dreyfus affair in France, a Jewish army officer was wrongly accused of spying, and conspiracy theories about Jewish power became popular. Over time, Jews were wrongly seen as both greedy businessmen and dangerous revolutionaries, two opposition stereotypes used by the Nazis. In 1917, the German government tried to use Jews to help negotiate peace during World War I. But instead of speaking to powerful Jewish leaders, they approached a small group of Zionists who believed in a Jewish homeland. These Zionists had strong political views and refused to help unless there were no land gains or war reparation. When monarchies were replaced by republics, like in Germany after 1918, Jewish influence in politics and economics declined even more. During the peace talks at Versailles, Jews were used only as experts, not decision makers. Nazi made anti Semitism a personal issue for everyone. Instead of just spreading hateful opinions, the Nazis made it part of their party's identity. For example, people had to prove they had no Jewish ancestor to join the Nazi party. The higher someone wanted to rise in the ranks, the farther back their family history had to be checked. This wasn't just about politics anymore, it was about blood and identity. Totalitarian movements are very open about their lies and crime. What's shocking about totalitarian movement is not just that people follow them, but how loyal they remain, even when they themselves become victims. Even when Nazis or Bolsheviks were arrested, tortured, or sent to concentration camps by their own leaders, they often stayed loyal. Some even helped in their own trials and accepted their death sentences, as long as they could still feel part of the movement. This loyalty is not real idealism, but in totalitarian movement, people's ability to think or judge is destroyed. Even Mussolini in Italy, who loved the idea of totalitarian state, never created a true totalitarian regime. His rule was more like a harsh dictatorship. Many other European countries like Hungary, Poland, Spain also had dictatorship but not full totalitarian system. The chapter 12 is totalitarianism in power. When a movement that wants to control the whole world only takes over one country, it runs into big trouble. After World War I, socialist parties become national rather than international. Each country's socialist parties cared more about national issues than about worldwide unity. So by the time socialist party gained power, they were already acting like normal national political parties. But this did not happen with totalitarian movements like Bolshevism or Nazism. When they seized power, they faced two dangers. First, they might become just regular dictatorship and lose the energy. Second, they might become limited by national borders, meaning they could no longer expand across the world. For a totalitarian movement, both possibilities are deadly. If they settle into regular government, they lose their revolutionary spirit. If they stay trapped in one country, they lose their dream of worldwide control. When totalitarian movements take power, they do three things. They turn the government into a base from which to plan global conquest. Second, they set up a secret police to enforce their fake reality and keep people under control. Third, they build concentration camps as experimental places to perfect total domination. Inside their countries, these totalitarian regimes didn't build clear, normal governments. They created confusing, chaotic systems where real power was hidden behind fake governments. For example, in Nazi Germany, every government job had a party duplicate, meaning two offices did the same thing, creating confusion. In Stalin Russia, the Soviets were kept alive but had no real power. The party controlled everything from behind the scenes. This messy setup wasn't by accident, it was on purpose. Totalitarian movements did not want stable government at all. Stability would slow them down. They wanted to stay in motion, constantly destroying old structures. Inside Germany, people were ruled by many groups at once: the civil government, the Nazi Party, the SA, the SS, all giving different orders. Nobody ever clearly told citizens who they should listen to first. People had to guess using their instinct. Their real center of power kept shifting, moving from one group to another, first the SA, then the SS, then the Nazi Security Service, without ever shutting the old groups down. Old groups still existed on paper, but they were powerless. They created this confusion because the Nazi did not want a clear, stable government. If power was confusing and constantly moving, nobody could challenge them. In Soviet Russia, something similar happened. There were three main organizations: the Soviet government, the Communist Party, and the secret police. Each had their own separate departments: military, education, economy, etc. Every factory even had secret police spying on workers, and another secret police group spying on those spies. In short, in totalitarian states, power is confusing, hidden, always shifting, and real authority is found in secret groups, not public offices. The chapter 13 is Ideology and Terror. Before totalitarian regimes like Hitler, Nazi Germany, or Stalin's Soviet Union seized full power, they started as political movements that worked very differently from normal political parties. Totalitarian movements were not mainly focused on winning election or creating policies. Instead, they wanted to completely change society and the way people thought. Their goal was to reorganize all parts of life under one absolute authority. These movements grew up by attracting people who felt isolated, lonely, and disconnected from society, especially during times of economic or political crisis. Unlike regular parties that debated policies, totalitarian movements focused on creating a powerful emotional bond with their followers. They used propaganda to spread false realities, offering simple answers to complex problems. They often blamed entire group for all of society's problem. Totalitarian movement promised a better future but demanded total loyalty in the present, silencing anyone who disagreed. Another key feature was their use of violence and terror. They were willing to lie, break laws, and even use murder to achieve their aims. Truth and facts did not matter to them. What mattered was control over how people thought and behaved. Leaders of these movements, like Hitler and Stalin, created a cult of personality, where the leader was seen as almost godlike and could never be questioned. In this chapter, Hannah talked about a novel form of government. A novel form of government means that totalitarianism is a completely new, extreme type of rule that aims to control everything in human life, not just politics. Example: in Stalin's Soviet Union, the government did not only control the election or the economy, it tried to control how people thought and felt. For example, children were encouraged to spy on their own parents and report them if they said anything against the government. Even private conversations at home were dangerous. People could be arrested and sent to labor camps just for telling a joke about Stalin. This shows that totalitarianism was a novel form of government because it tried to control not only public life but private life too. The last 14th chapter is Epilogue, Reflection on the Hungarian Revolution. After the death of Stalin in 1953, the totalitarian system he created in the Soviet Union began to face difficulties. Stalin had used extreme fear and violence to maintain total control. But after his death, the leaders who followed him could not rule in the same way. Although the Soviet Union remained a dictatorship, the harshest methods of terror were reduced. This change showed that while the system survived, it was no longer as powerful or all consuming as it had been under Stalin. The totalitarianism system after Stalin's death. Russia after Stalin's death. When Stalin died, there was a power struggle among Soviet leaders. Eventually, Nikita Khrushchev emerged as the new leader. In 1956, Khrushchev gave a secret speech criticizing Stalin's brutal rule and exposing his crimes. After this, some small reforms were introduced and there was less fear compared to Stalin's time. However, the Soviet Union stayed a dictatorship where the Communist Party remained in full control. Even though the worst terror ended, people still had little freedom and the government continued to tightly manage society. The Hungarian Revolution. In 1956, the people of Hungary rose up against Soviet rule. They demanded more freedom, democratic reforms, and independence from Moscow. For a short time, the Hungarian Revolution seemed successful and a new government was formed. However, the Soviet Union quickly sent tanks and troops to crush the uprising. Thousands of Hungarians were killed and many more fled the country. The brutal suppression of the revolution proved that the Soviet Union would not allow its satellite state to leave its control, and that any attempt at independence would be met with force.